If decluttering feels overwhelming, you're not doing it wrong. You're just doing it in the wrong order. And we're going to explore the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to do declutter, especially in this stage of life, 50 and over, and why those mistakes often leave you feeling more stressed, more defeated, and surrounded by even more chaos than when you actually started the whole process. I'm going to share a simple way to build momentum without burning yourself out, along with practical tools you can use right away to make decisions feel easier and less emotional. I'll talk about why decluttering after 50 is different, why it brings up emotions people don't expect, why this process is less about getting rid of stuff and more about creating space, both physically and emotionally, for what comes next. And one of the biggest mistakes I see people make when decluttering is trying to do too much at one time. Clutter always creates mental overwhelm. It's visual noise is what I call it. It's unfinished decisions. It's reminders of things we meant to do but never quite got around to. So when we decide to tackle the biggest rooms, the hardest categories, or the most emotionally loaded items first, it often backfires on us. It comes from really good intentions. We tell ourselves, if I just deal with the hardest part first, everything will be easier. It will be all downhill from here. And that's what we want, to make things easier for us. But what actually happens is the opposite. We underestimate how long it will take. We underestimate how tiring decision-making can actually be. And we underestimate how emotional this process can feel. Instead of feeling motivated, we end up feeling defeated before we've really begun. It's the old adage of biting off more than you can chew. This often shows up as jumping between spaces. We start in an unused bedroom, and then we wander into the kitchen because we notice a drawer that bothers us, and then we open a closet and start sorting through things in there, and then we remember the garage needs attention as well. And before we know it, we're surrounded by half-sorted piles in multiple rooms, which is not what you want. Nothing is finished, and that's when people say things like, I worked all day and I feel like I got nowhere, or I made things worse, or I should have just left it alone. It's like being like a bumblebee, moving from flower to flower. Lots of motion, very little completion. And unfinished spaces are incredibly draining. They sit in the back of your mind. They create a visual clutter, and they make you feel behind even when you've put in effort. So here's what I always say: start small and build momentum. Momentum is absolutely everything in decluttering. Start with something contained: a single drawer, one shelf, one cabinet, one closet. Completion matters more than speed. Finishing one small area gives you a sense of control. It gives your brain a win, and that feeling carries you into your next task. Another approach is to declutter by category, not by room. Books are a great example of this. Most people have books spread throughout their house: the den, kitchen shelves, bedrooms, offices, living rooms. So bring all those books into one space. Yes, it looks messy at first, but it's temporary. Then go through them together. Start with cookbooks, then novels, then business or reference books. And so by doing it by category, you see everything at once, and then something shifts. You realize how many you actually have, and you notice duplicates, and you notice which ones you've already emotionally outgrown. And it becomes much easier to keep the ones that truly matter to you. Here's a helpful rule of thumb when you're going through this process. If you haven't touched a book in more than a year, you're unlikely to reach for it in the coming year. Unless, of course, it holds sentimental, historical, or maybe monetary value. And keeping a book because you should read it someday is very different from keeping a book because you love it. So starting small creates progress, and progress creates motivation, and motivation keeps you going. And that's what we want for you. So the importance of a clear decision rules is also key. You know, another major reason people get stuck is decision fatigue. It's a real thing. When every single item requires a fresh emotional decision, the process becomes really exhausting. That's why having clear criteria of time is really important. So I often talk about the 12-month rule. If you haven't used something in the last year, it's really unlikely you'll use it in the next year coming. And this isn't about guilt, it's about patterns. And of course, there are exceptions. For example, I have a baster I use for basting the turkey, and I only use it a couple times a year, but it's a specialized tool and it does get used within a 12-month period. So it doesn't get used a lot, but it does get used. So it stays. The goal isn't perfection, the goal is clarity. And one more important thing, don't rush the process. Decluttering is definitely not a race. Set aside intentional time. Maybe it's one afternoon a week, or maybe it's 25 minutes a day for 2 or 3 days in a row. Set a timer, stop when it goes off. Ending a session feeling accomplished is far more important than pushing until you're exhausted. Decluttering after 50 is not the same as decluttering earlier in your life. We're often in a very different stage. And you know, the kids may be gone or almost gone. Retirement may be on the horizon. Downsizing might be something we're quietly thinking about, but not ready to take action yet. And with that comes bigger questions like, what do I actually need now? What does the next chapter look like for me? What do I want my days to feel like? This is where decluttering becomes emotional, you know, because it's not just about objects, it's about identity. A closet full of work clothes can represent a career. A room full of furniture can represent a season of family life. You know, boxes in the basement can represent plans we never quite lived out. So letting go doesn't mean those seasons didn't matter at all to you. What it does mean is that you're honoring the fact that life has evolved for you. For many people, there's also a strong desire not to burden their children one day with all their stuff. They don't want their kids standing in a house full of stuff, wondering what to do with it all while grieving. So decluttering becomes an act of care, not a task, not just for yourself, but for the people you actually love and care about. It's about creating space, physically and emotionally, for the life you want next. And here's some practical tips to make the journey smoother for you. So let's go back to the 1-year rule with the real life example of books that I just talked about. This actually happened with my husband. He kept drywall and pieces of wood in our garage for years because he might need them for a future project. That project never happened. Those materials sat there quietly taking up space in our garage. And so what do you do with items like that? Things you keep because they're useful or could be useful someday. Here's a simple approach. Put a sticky note on the item with today's date and check in again in, let's say, 6 to 12 months. Ask yourself really honestly, has this been used? Is there a clear plan to use it? Because often we tell ourselves we're saving money by keeping things like this for those future plans. But if they never get used, are you really saving money? And could someone else use that item right now? That's where places like Habitat for Humanity Restore can be a wonderful, wonderful option. Another helpful method is asking whether something brings joy or stress. This is Marie Kondo. If it brings joy, keep it. If it brings stress, pause and ask why you're holding on to it then. Sometimes thanking an item for what it once represented makes it easier to let it go. And another option is ranking items on a scale of 1 to 7. And I like a 7-point scale because it forces clarity. If something lands between a 1 and a 5, it's probably not serving your current life and unlikely to serve your actual future one. And finally, consider an accountability partner, someone who can be objective, someone who isn't emotionally attached. And that person can gently ask, does this still fit your life you actually want? So, decluttering is about more than just creating space in your home, although that is one objective. It's about creating space in your mind and in your life. And when we let go of the physical clutter, we often release emotions we didn't even realize we were carrying. Emotions like guilt or obligation and endless what ifs. So, the outcome of decluttering isn't emptiness, it's clarity, it's peace, it's freedom. And it's making room for the people, the experiences, and the possessions that truly add value to your life. You know, I'd like to think of decluttering not as a task, but really as a gift to myself and to my loved ones. And if you'd like more guidance, I've linked another video that you may find helpful.